I'm going to share the window here. Game changer for me. So essentially, this person said for about 20 years, they've been dealing with back pain. They had a constant low grade, frequently, pulled muscle type feeling, and where they felt like they couldn't get out of bed. It said 12 years ago, I had a severe case and went to the chiropractor, and they did their thing. And then the next day or that night, they woke up with pain down the leg, got perhaps some, it doesn't say, but imaging said that they found 2 herniated discs. And basically after that, for the last 12 years, sounds like they had really not been able to solve their issue. But about 6 months ago, this person started doing 2 things: a couch stretch, which for people who are unfamiliar, couch stretch is where you're kind of like in a half kneeling position and your front of your thigh is getting a massive stretch. They did that 5 to 7 days a week on both sides. And then the other, interestingly, was somewhat heavy, actually, 100 plus kilos, trap bar deadlifts. Okay, so Andrew, you want to explain what a trap bar deadlift is?
Well, it's kind of like in between a squat pattern and a deadlift, but then the bar itself isn't just a typical barbell, it's just a straight bar. You kind of like stand in a little cage in the middle there, and then makes it a little bit easier to hold, as there's like little neutral handles and you stand in between all the weight.
Yeah, so the trap bar deadlift, and I'll just go ahead and swap this over, is one of my more favorite ways to deadlift. I think it gets, it's like better for like varying body types. Some people doing the traditional kind of deadlift position might strain a little bit more in the low back. And I feel like this more squat pattern that Andrew's talking about there's the actual bar. Let's see if we can get a picture. It just sort of gets the angles a little bit more correct in my mind, and puts load more to kind of like the hips and the hamstrings and things like that. So it's harder to mess up the form. And would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's like way easier to get into. It's a more beginner friendly exercise.
Yeah. Let's see. I realize
it generally targets the muscles that people want to target.
Yeah. So here we go. That's
a little bit easier.
Yeah. So there we go. All right. So we're going to go back to the Reddit. So anyway, 100 kilos that's 225 in pounds. And he was doing 5 sets of 5. I don't know the frequency, but looks like enough to build up to somewhat heavy trap bar. And then it said today, so this was an hour ago, they woke up and they were prepared to move, all gingerly. And it turns out that they haven't had any pain. And then interestingly, says, I realized I haven't had any pain for several months. So breaking the cycle of pain, what do you think went well in this scenario, Andrew?
I think he clearly has been experimenting for probably like the past however long, like this 20 or 12 years or something. And I think he's just kind of found like a few exercises that really matched his body and his symptoms there.
Yeah. So, for somebody who has back pain, it's probably not likely that they're going to go to the gym, see the trap bar deadlift, and just start out with 100 kilos. So when we're always talking about rehab for back pain, we mention progressive overload, tending to be something that everybody should, respect, right? So starting out slow and almost proving to your body that, after exercise, how does your body respond the next day? And are you progressively adding either volume or intensity with the appropriate recovery in between, and experimenting in that way as well?
Yeah, for sure. So for this guy, apparently it took him maybe about 6 months ago where he started finding like a stretch that maybe he found some symptom relief or something was like nice about the stretch that he enjoyed. So he kept up with it for like a whole 6 months, right? And possibly he had an idea of like re-strengthening the whole body, or at least like from the lumbar downwards. And yeah, he just ended up picking the trap bar deadlift there. Probably worked on it for the whole 6 months or possibly more.
Do you think his core was weak? And you think just doing deadlifts strengthened his core to put everything kind of in place?
Well, I feel like that's kind of a loaded question there.
Yeah.
I personally don't think his core is weak. It's kind of hard to diagnose or even tell. Like, no practitioner can kind of have like this X-ray vision to just scan and figure out the exact thing that's quote unquote wrong or not working in a person there.
Yeah, I kind of set you up there because there's really it's not really a gold standard for testing, core strength. So as somebody that has worked in hospitals in acute care and ICUs and things like that, you have people after motor vehicle accidents that we are not only getting up and moving right away. So some of the worst injuries, as long as they're stable, medically, they're obviously not loading an acute fracture. But the point is, if somebody's been cleared by the doctor in the ICU to get up and walk, we are almost getting them up day one. So using an extreme example like a motor vehicle accident, comparing it to somebody who is able to get around but has intolerable pain, whether it's a sciatic-like symptom or just a general back pain, it just stands to reason that finding movements that are going well should be really kind of like the priority. And a lot of people are trying things that are putting them in positions that are putting too much stress in areas, and it's kind of like keeping them flared up. So one, it's nice to have a provider or professional to show you the things that are going to be quote unquote good for you. But the case about like core strength and my comment about working in acute care is I regard core weakness as people who can't sit up in bed on their own. And so that to me is true quote unquote weakness. And, a lot of the evidence doesn't really show that people who have back pain typically have this idea of a weak core.
Yeah. And I think probably another thing is there aren't any magic exercises. Like, I think there were like studies trying to compare the differences between like a powerlifting program or a core program or even a Pilates program to see if there were like any differences in improvement for back pain. And it showed that in the long term, they all have like pretty similar results. Even like a simple walking program itself could improve somebody's back pain symptoms and like a person's capacity. So it's like, if all these things are similar, then maybe the common denominator between all these things is like general movement and slowly progressing and respecting our symptoms is probably what helps people the most in the super long term compared to looking for like a hyper-specific transverse abdominis exercise or something like that.
Yeah. So there's a couple ways I want to take your comment. And one is you're describing, and what this person is describing is what's considered thoughtless, fearless. It's like a thoughtless and fearless movement, or fearless and thoughtless movement, meaning, and that's a quote from Louis Gifford, who was a physio. Louis Gifford, right?
You don't know who that is.
Okay. All right. I'm going to send you some stuff after this, but, one of the pioneers into like understanding pain in the context of like musculoskeletal rehab. And, it's this idea that this guy who posted, or this gal, basically got to a point. They said several months they hadn't noticed their pain. So they had gotten to a point where they are fearless. They're trying the deadlift, and the movements have become thoughtless, right? So if we are too afraid to move, and we're always in our head about keeping a core tight when we're moving around, getting up and down from the couch, that it stands to reason that kind of fear and that kind of always having these thoughts of uncertainty and protection could be in our way. If this
Yeah.
person had gotten on Reddit and said, or had found or heard that deadlifts, never do deadlifts. Oh my God, deadlifts are the worst thing that you can do for your back. They would have never found trap bar deadlift. They would have never progressed to over 225 for 5x5, which is great. And they wouldn't have been empowered to all of a sudden, overcome some of these symptoms. So those are my two thoughts, like right away on that, on what you described.
Yeah, for sure. So I think like from a super zoomed out perspective, it's like, hey, you found 2 exercises. One of them might have been symptom relieving, and the other exercise was like something that built the body up a little bit stronger. And pretty
Yeah,
much he kept progressing those things, and then eventually that was his specific way out of his.
yeah, yeah. Also, just contrasting the passive approach, which he, had 12 years ago versus the active approach. So, going to the gym and, we're not saying like getting stronger, right? It's like on one hand, we can't say core weakness is not the problem, but getting stronger is the solution. It is kind of like this idea that like you're stimulating that area with movement and you happen to get stronger. It's not really a bad thing.
Yeah, I think in my head, it's like, are we trying to focus on getting a person stronger, or are we more so looking at like, are we able to make the person quote unquote more functional or more able to do the things that they want to in life? I think that's what movement / exercise / the gym can really help out on.
Yeah. I just always sometimes think like in my explanations, talking about the evidence or, there's no conclusive evidence to say that like, if you have back pain, you have a weak core, but then we recommend lifting and deadlifts. It's kind of like, well, wait a second. How is that not the problem? But then this over here is the solution. And you're right. It's more about, I mean, lifting things is a functional, and that's a buzzword that has been for the last, 12 years. It's a functional movement, and it's functional in the sense that like you got to pick shit up off the floor. So, um, stimulating the area. I mean, you're improving blood flow, coordination of the muscles moving together. Um,
I think a big thing is like psychologically, we're building up confidence as well and sending new messages of safety.
Mhm. Yeah, that would be the biggest thing is, it hurts when I pick stuff up. Now and I mentioned this at the beginning, I'm proving to my body that it's not a movement that I should fear. And secondary to all that, you happen to get stronger in that position. That's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, I think there's so many. I think what I like about like gym exercises is that there's so many secondary side effects, like improving bone mass, improving muscle mass, and you mentioned coordination as well. So it's like those things are all good things, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Barbell Medicine, on one of their podcasts about like knee osteoarthritis, they were mentioning just like, generally exercise improves all diseases. So it's kind of like, is the knee exercise the thing that cures the OA, or is it the fact that we are,
systemically making a person healthier.
yeah, which overall reduces inflammation. And inflammation is chemical irritants that, like you'll always have some form of arthritis, whether it hurts or not is the next thing. And that's a rabbit hole we don't really want to go into today, but
Yeah. And I think that there are a bunch of other side effects and pros on why gym exercises or exercises itself are really good, or I guess why they're recommended. I think the biggest thing is that as a person loses their function, other parts of their health start getting worse as well. It's like, hey, we might be gaining a lot of extra weight. We might also be losing a bunch of our cardiovascular health. And we might, since we're not moving at all and not really lifting anything to stimulate our bones and our muscles, we might be losing our bone mass and our muscle mass. It's like, these are all these little side effects that like make gym exercises or just lifting in general more enticing in my head.
yeah. And it makes me wonder too, while this person got over 100 kilos, sticking to a moderate weight, not really always pushing a idea of like a max are great principles in general. I mean, it's, everybody hears about the use it or lose it principle. I mean, if you just for months and months and years on end went and did pretty much like a not too light, even light deadlifts, I mean, you're going to maintain a certain amount of muscle mass and things like that. And it's like, yes, it's probably a good idea to bump up to moderate at some point. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that you don't have to receive benefit from lifting, going in and be operating at like a 90% max all the time.
For sure.
If you're always trying to raise that ceiling, you're eventually gonna hit the ceiling. I mean,
I think there's like other benefits of lightweight as well. It's like quote unquote habituation, which is just like getting used to a certain movement and feeling more safer. That can also help downregulate how sensitive a person or you might feel in specific movements or tasks.
Yeah. Well, awesome. So to kind of recap, and maybe we'll ask this person onto the podcast and they can share their story and we get a little more details on what worked and what didn't for them. But essentially, just to recap, we're comparing and contrasting a passive approach versus an active approach, like what a rehab provider, like a physical therapist or a chiropractor, does to me, or what can I do for myself. Also the progressive overload principle, and then I really like this idea that I mentioned is this fearless, thoughtless movement. This is always the goal, is I wake up and I'm no longer thinking about it. Like if you can get somebody that, you're working with to that point, it's like, all right, you don't need me anymore. And that's always been my goal, is I don't want people to endlessly rely on me. It's about guiding them to that point, which is cool.
Yeah, it's like the whole concept of empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like so important for a person to live their life.
All right. So let us know if you guys have any questions, like and subscribe and all that with that influencer crap. But we're just happy to help and share our thoughts on this stuff. So till next time.
All right, cool. See you.